When you think about the 18th century, you probably picture guys in wigs, right? But it's also the time that gave us Isaac Newton's laws. This idea that the universe was this perfect, rational, clockwork machine. So how could an age so obsessed with reason also be, well, so full of absurdity and hypocrisy? That's what we're digging into today, the great contradiction of the neoclassical age.
All right, so let's get right to it. What was the neoclassical age really?
Well, here's the thing. On the one hand, you've got an age totally obsessed with reason. But just under the surface, oh, it was a world of pure chaos and absurdity. And that is the tension we're going to unpack. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're talking about the late 1600s through the mid 1700s. And the people living then, they proudly called their time the Age of Reason. But as you're about to see, this so-called age of logic and order was also, well, an age of absolutely staggering hypocrisy. Thinkers like Isaac Newton were huge at the time, and their ideas led to this widespread belief that the entire universe was this orderly, rational place. And honestly, you can't blame them for wanting that. They were coming off a century of just brutal civil wars and religious chaos. So yeah, they were desperate for some stability. This made them look back to ancient Greece and Rome as like the gold standard for how to do things right, with structure, clarity, and proper decorum in everything. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, there was this massive gap between all these high-minded ideals and what people were actually doing. So let's talk about that clash between high society's grand ideas and its very, very petty problems. So you have this perfect ideal, order, logic, proper behavior, and then you have the reality, gossip, vanity, fanaticism. It was a society that preached reason from the rooftops, but in practice was doing the exact opposite. And let's get specific here. You had the wealthy elite, the so-called beau monde, who were just completely obsessed with silly things like fashion, flirting, and who was seen with whom. Meanwhile, you've got raging religious extremism and these super intense political fights between the two big parties, the Whigs and the Tories. You can think of them as the bitter liberal and conservative rivals of their day. And in the middle of all this, your reputation, your honor, was literally everything. So think about it. If you live in an age that's so proud of its logic, how do you call out all its hypocrisy? Well, you use its own logic against it. And that's where satire comes in. It was the perfect weapon. Basically, a mirror held right up to society's face. Yeah, you can think of satire as a kind of corrective lens. It used the era's most cherished tool, logic, to show just how illogical everyone was being. It basically became the public conscience of the Age of Reason, the one thing holding people accountable to the very standards they claimed to admire. And man, this era produced some of the most brilliant satire ever written. I mean, you've got Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. It's hilarious. He takes a super trivial event, someone snipping off a lock of a lady's hair, and treats it like it's this grand epic battle. It just perfectly roasts the vanity of the rich. Then, of course, there's the master, Jonathan Swift. He uses the wild adventures in Gulliver's Travels to tear apart the flaws in his own society. And he doesn't stop there. In A Tale of a Tub, he just unleashes his wit on religious extremism, and the result is absolutely devastating. But it wasn't all about satire, though. The whole literary scene was changing. Let's take a look at how other things, like what was happening on stage in the theater, and even a brand new kind of writing, were also capturing the spirit of the times. Okay, the theater during this period was a total roller coaster. First, you had Restoration comedy, which was super witty, pretty scandalous, and all about celebrating this new, liberated, anti-Puritan vibe after the monarchy came back. But then the middle class starts getting more powerful, and they wanted something a bit more, well, conservative. So you get sentimental comedy, these moral plays designed to make you cry about how good virtue is, not laugh advice. But, people can only cry for so long before they want to laugh again. So, of course, there was a backlash. And that gave us anti-sentimental comedy, which brought cleverness and real laughter back with amazing plays like The School for Scandal. Now, away from the theater, something totally new was bubbling up: the periodical essay. This was pioneered by this brilliant duo, Richard Steele and Joseph Addison. And what they created, it was basically the 18th century version of a blog or a must-read online column. They were short, they came out regularly, and they were aimed squarely at that growing middle-class audience. And their main publication, The Spectator, had this amazing mission statement. They wanted to take philosophy out of the dusty, quiet libraries and bring it into the noisy, bustling coffee houses where people actually hung out. Their goal was to make big ideas witty, engaging, and actually relevant to your day-to-day life. And oh boy, did they succeed. These periodicals totally changed the game. They basically democratized culture. They gave the middle class a kind of handbook on how to be a proper gentleman or lady. They would poke fun at things like gossip or crazy fashion trends. And maybe most importantly, they created a clear, simple, conversational style of writing that pretty much set the standard for English prose for centuries to come. So, what's the big takeaway here? What does all this add up to? Well, it's that this whole period completely changed what it meant to be a writer.
Suddenly, literature wasn't just about telling a good story. Writers like Pope, Swift, and the guys from The Spectator, Steele and Addison, they saw themselves as public critics, as moral guides. They truly believed that writing had a job to do, to teach people and make society better. And that's a legacy that is absolutely still with us today.
And that brings me to one last thought. These writers, back in the Age of Reason, they held a mirror up to their world, showing all its strange contradictions. It kind of makes you wonder, right? If our books, our movies, our TV shows, our social media, if all of that is the mirror to our society, what exactly does that reflection look like today? What does it say about us?